And so I will be talking about some peer review and so what sort of things do we need to do as authors of the papers. So and as you know, there are some basic things that I need to cover. And as you all know, that so peer review is used as a baseline of our own research process, and for the manuscripts in journals, and especially for the book proposals and for the grant proposals, we use this methodology of peer review, and of course. It refers to an external review as well, like our peers, like our colleagues, and so it is considered as a review by our peers and our colleagues. And we know that TÜBİTAK process is the most difficult and challenging one because, and so maybe it is because that they are giving money, maybe, but peer reviews are not as strict as the TÜBİTAK. And as we know that spatial reviews are designed to assess the validity, quality, and often the authenticity of the articles for publication, and therefore the ultimate purpose is to integrity of the scientific value of the articles by filtering them, and then therefore the reviewers' comments and recommendations should be unbiased, and they should only provide expert feedbacks, and they are expected to provide and these their values. And first of all they receive, then before the triaging, performing triage for the, especially for the powerful journals with the high impact factors, especially these triage is performed by the assistants. And if for this triage it means a preliminary assessment, of course, if they are considered that it is relevant to their journals, then the peer review process is started. And then after identify after I getting this reflection from the peers, then they are either accepted or rejected. And you see here the workflow of this peer review process. And however, for there are three types of process, and one is single blind, double blind, or open peer review reference rate. And you see here the names of the reviewer is or even is shown on the website of the journals. And in the old times and in the 1990s, and the peer review used to be much more difficult, and so you used to send three copies of the of papers, and they will be sending it to the peer reviewers, and it may be taking for months, for even a year actually. And today, so it is much more easier to send, to submit these papers to the journals, and also they have the more easier and easier peer review process as well. And as however, for the when we look at the online website of the BMI, and it includes five or more review stages, for example, editorial, internal, and external reviews. And of course, for the highly cited journals, the acceptance rate is more than 5%. And however, this rate is not that high in our country. And in our country, there are volunteer teams for the peer reviews in our country mostly. And of course, because of the scarcity of the peer reviewers, the process may be quite slower. And then because of being a voluntary process in our country, and so it may take 1.5 months, for 1.5 hours actually. And in order to, they are using they are using different methodologies, and for example, they are using accessibility rights for the Scopus database for every review that you perform, or they may have performed discounts for every review that you have performed, and actually every in all the being paid does not necessarily mean that it is a predator journal, and also even the European Union does not, for example, European Union, and they will be and most of the journals are uh, transforming from the paid subscription and membership to hybrid at the first place, then the open source journals as well, and actually on the kappa level the overlapping is very few, as you see here, and in order to check whether in order to be objective and reliable, so there is a requirement for submitting this to 6 reviewers in order to be in order to be very much reliant on the quality of the and however plagiarism is not a plagiarism was not a problem anymore in our country, because we have the journal park in our country, and even when you are submitting your journal, your paper, then they can even can check perform can perform the concordance and their relevance aspect and checks. And first of all, they, they are asking whether the research appropriate for the journal, whether the content have an archival value, or whether the research important for the field, or whether the paper stay focused on its subject matter. And even though they are not as strict as the Turkak, and however, when you send your papers to these to do these reviews, and they are also asking the reviewers just for the sake of the novelties, because you may be performing the same type of research, one in Mexico, for example, one in Turkey, and so that is why that assessing the methodology of the papers, and therefore the reviewers should be unbiased as much as possible, and so in order to while performing this task, and so reviewers should be writing their reviews in a clear and constructive manner. So even though you reject them, so you need to help the authors to develop their missing parts by focusing on their shortcomings and on their deficient side, and to get when we were dealing with the psychological physical pharma side, and however together with our current example, so it shows that there are some segments that are supporting, and of course you should not be there should be minor revision or the major revision for your especially for your papers, and so I cannot claim that they are very harsh for the authors, except from the several companies. And what should the reviewers focus for their reviewings? And first of all, they should check, and they should not terminate saying that this is the objective of our paper, and there should be a soft transition from the introduction to methodology and its outcome. So you should elaborate the contribution of the paper to the discipline, and the results should be clearly presented and highlighted. And the method selection is really so much important, and ethical criteria should be taken into consideration, of course. And that person should be able to repeat respective paper outside. And apart from the result side, and this was for the discussion side especially, should be judged in part by the ability of the authors to frame and interpret the main findings. uh, and of course, we should not we should not be for we should not be forgetting that while we read peer review process of the journal, and each journal should is expected to uh, describe how you should write down your paper, and how you prepare each section of the manuscript, and how the authors in this process is uh, performing this. And for example, for the Equator network, because and I have learned that uh, this Equator network should be selected as one of the leading control part, and they are asking us to take into consideration consort guidelines. If it is an and they ask about strobe guideline, if it is an, for example, observational, and if you are working on the case study, you need to check the care guideline, for example. So these guidelines help you and also guides you, of course, what sort of paper you should be working on. The Equator Network means enhancing the quality and the transparency of health research, and so they have different guidelines, very much accessible, and from different perspectives, and it really provides you a very clear guideline in order to help you understand what issues needs to be reviewed by the reviewers, or which are not. And for STROBE are the observational studies and also cross-sectional studies. They have also their translation into Turkish language as well, and it explains about what needs to be taken into consideration, how the power impact and impact rate should be included or not, and especially for reporting of the observational studies in epidemiology. And these guidelines should be taken into consideration, and I sincerely believe that it will prevent biased results if we can really benefit from these perspectives. And for example, Bantam company says that the strobe and prism should be used, and so uh, I have some even, and especially we have seen that publications are mostly online, and I checked whether there is any strict checking, and especially how to report results of the internet surveys like the cherries, for example. And here you need to identify your target audience of of your surveyors and surveyees here actually. And for the samples you have taken, and what sort of platforms did you use for submitting your questionnaire and your surveys, and should they appear only in once, or should they repeat one more for whether and how did you prevent participation on one person to this review? And they have explained all of them for the cherries, and there are also dozens of other different parameters in the Equator network apart from this. And I sincerely believe that, and so apart from and conclusion, we can say that peer review process is an essential part of all scientific journals. Yes, they have their pathologies, and they are suffer from finding the reviewers. And so of course, and I hope that we can find a session for finding the junior reviews. And actually sometimes we have to, and in order to write down an article as a paper, then you have to check all these parameters and factors. Then I hope that we can embed